What we have here is two plates with concentric rings, such as you see in this situation here, even though the geometry is a little different. And these all add up to form what's a capacitor plate. Basically, you have a surface here, and if you apply an electric charge to any point on this, the whole thing builds up a static field around it. And often you'll get sparks jumping between the plates as the thing tries to equalize its potential out and become to one static electric potential. So this is hooked to a Tesla transformer, which is often grounded to one side. And what you have here is you have a space in between these two antennas that becomes altered by the high voltage, high frequency output of the Tesla transformer. So what this reduces to is basically as you have two plates of a capacitor driven by a high frequency or impulse current generator, which produces a current in this space. The intensity of this current is directly proportional to the amount of lines of electric force that are produced by this coil, which is often called the voltage, and the time rate at which this is charged and discharged by the sudden reversals of electric potential produced by the coil. So inside this you basically have a modified space here consisting of a kind of ether shock waves. Now I found that if you take and put a spark gap across this, that this space then discharges in nanoseconds, and you produce a kind of explosive action in this space. In other words, you have electric lines of induction which form a type of compression inside this space, which is often wrongly called a scalar field. In actuality, what it is, it's a static longitudinal field. So you can kind of view it like as a tank or cylinder filled with compressed gas. And when you put a spark gap across this, then this pressure is suddenly relieved and all of this force explodes outwards faster than the velocity of light against the bounding structures. We've had people, indicate they felt rather profound experiences inside this space. Okay, what Lukoski was actually doing, however, was he was, rather than feeding this thing straight in with the field of electrical flux supplied along a conductor from a Tesla transformer, he was feeding the thing like this and supplying electric current around the loop, which is exactly 90 degrees from the other system. Okay, basically what you have here is you take your capacitor, which you normally discharge into the Tesla coil, and discharge it straight into this loop, and it produces what's called an oscillating circuit. And basically, if you take the coefficient or the degree at which this loop can store magnetic energy through the lines of force that surround it, and the degree of which the capacitor can store dielectric energy by the lines of force that stand between it, then that gives you the basic period of oscillation, which produces the familiar electric waveform we call a sine wave. Now, of course, losses and radiation eat this up, so in actuality you get a wave that dampens out and disappears, which is called an electric oscillation. Okay, what Lukoski did was put a resonant structure inside of this loop to be excited by the electromagnetic field and longitudinal field and scalar fields produced by this loop, each one of these having its own little capacitor and serving as an oscillating circuit. Now the theory was here is each one of these oscillators would oscillate at a different frequency, and if you had enough of these loops, you would produce all the frequencies required to resonate to the individual oscillating circuits inside the body. So you start off with a long wavelength or low frequency and work your way up, so you produce what's called a harmonic spectrum. So if you looked at this on a graph where you had, let's say, rate or frequency, rate of oscillation going this way, and intensity going this way, it produces a series of oscillations which keep on going on and on forever. But of course the amplitude drops by some function similar to an exponential function with respect to distance. And also the fact that you have kind of a raucous random pattern in the spark gap here, these things broaden out to produce kind of an envelope, electrical energy. So if you have, let's say, a plot of the cells in your body and they resonate at these various frequencies, then if you feed them a spectrum of energy, then each one will pick its own characteristic frequency out of that spectrum of energy and oscillate, and Lakowski felt this oscillation would power the cell back up and bring it back to life.